This is the ongoing conversations that we're having with various different folks and firms that might be owners' representatives for us in addressing the situation we have with our pool and whether we should redevelop it or how we go about redeveloping it, having an owner's representative to represent the board and the community's interests. So tonight we have Jansen Land Consulting, and I'm going to let the folks at Jansen describe more of who they are and what they do. Last night I talked a little bit about what the criteria are: Fairfax County, deeply experienced, experience in Reston, experience with real estate development, land use, all of these things. These people came up in a screening that I did based on what they had. They had involvement with Winter Hill. And you may remember that Winter Hill was a project that was discussed in our discussion with the real estate lawyer at Reese Broom, our law firm. And so through a long sort of thread of over a couple of years, here we are again with an organization that that was a situation, as we talked about with Fraser Forbes, that was not completely analogous to what we're doing, but certainly is a lot parallel to what we're having to do here. And for the reasons that Fraser Forbes discussed, it's not our situation, but suffice it to say, this group has a lot of experience in the kinds of things that we're looking for. So why don't you just introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Greg May, Jansen Land Consulting.
Jason Shear, Jansen Land Consulting.
And Melanie Graff, Jansen Land Consulting.
Great. And why don't we just start off by tell us a little bit about Jansen Land Consulting and what you do? And
Sure. We're a consulting project management firm. We've been in existence since 2010. We're 3 people right now, actually 4 employees. What we do is we manage land development processes, whether it be feasibility reports for developers that are looking to develop a property, managing the entitlement engineering to get a project approved through, the site plan approval, plats and all that. And then we'll actually manage the site development, the construction of the site as well. Not anything vertical, no buildings, just the land development portion of it. And we've advised HOAs on a couple of occasions on different matters. But again, we don't do the engineering ourselves. We typically advise a client how to proceed, and then we'll manage the firms that they hire through the process, protecting the owner's interest. So you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and just, to get into a little more of the detail, the 3 of us, what we do is we actually, depending on the needs of an owner and a piece of property, we will shepherd the process, as Greg said. So we'll get down with the municipality, with the planners, with the council people on particular boards to actually work through some of the details. We do that up front, and again, as Greg said, we are a full service. So we would start there, work our way into the engineering entitlement, the final design of a community, and then ultimately the build out and turn over to a builder. As Greg said, we've got 6 years of experience, or not 6 years of experience, but our firm has been around since 2010. Greg and I, it was Bob Jansen who started the company. He actually, formed the organization in 2008, but didn't bring us on to 2010. He's the 4th wheel, along with Melanie, Greg, myself. You want to add anything more?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about myself. I just joined, I guess in February. So I have been in this area doing land development for over 25 years. I'm a civil engineer, professional engineer by trade. I've worked for various national home builders, several different developers, and my latest job before Jansen Land, I was the regional president for a company called Walton Development and Management, who owns over 100,000 acres of land across all of North America. We were based out of Calgary, but I was the East Region president, so I did everything in this area, managed everything in this area. So that land was land, a lot of it was land that was just pure raw land that we bought, farmland in some cases, just completely raw, that we had to put a strategy together for what we were going to build on it, and then take it all the way through the rezoning process, doing all the community outreach and all the miscellaneous with all the different community organizations as well as the government officials, and so putting that all in process. There was also a land development element as well. So I've been doing this a long time. I've done everything from acquisitions all the way through bond release, as Jason and Greg mentioned. So that's a little bit about my history. Even though I'm new to the company, I've been doing this a long time.
Great, and one of the things that I've been helping the board with is making sure that we have experts, because all of these things, that, anything that we do with the pool property, particularly on the development side, is going to have to go through the Fairfax County Commission. So we're
Right.
looking for people who've got experience with the Fairfax County Commission. Can you please tell us a little bit about your experiences in Fairfax County and, particular projects that you've done, if you've done stuff in Reston, what those things have been?
Melanie, I think I'm going to defer to you because as we talked outside, Parker, I think Melanie would be our point person on this project.
Yeah, so absolutely. Over a number of years, I've done many different projects in Fairfax County, from as small as like 6-lot subdivisions, and that in particular was when I worked for Pulte Homes, all the way up to at the metro station over in Vienna. The area that was around that, I served as the development manager for Pulte at the time, but there was also multifamily that Bazzuto was building, and so there was a lot going on there. So I've done numerous different projects. I've done a lot of smaller rezonings, and this is not necessarily a rezoning, but it's basically the same process of going through the community outreach and then going to the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission and reaching out to everybody. So I've done a number of those smaller rezonings that were in existing neighborhoods, very similar to this. So I do have that experience, and then Greg also has additional experience here in Reston.
Yeah, I obviously, even though Melanie would be our point person, if we worked for the homeowner association, it'd be a collaborative effort between us. And I do have a lot of experience in Fairfax County as well. As a matter of fact, I used to work for Reston Land Corporation, if any of you know the developer Reston back in the day. So have a lot of experience in Reston.
So can you just mention a couple of projects you've been involved with in Reston? Some of the things that you were referencing.
A lot of the communities in the north end of Reston, I helped manage the development of those. But it has been a little bit of a while. I think we talked about this on the phone. It hasn't been very recent, but over the years, all through Reston, but mainly the north end of Reston.
And are you doing anything in Fairfax County as a firm right now, or have you done something recently in the last 3 to 5 years?
We helped KB Home manage this Huntington Mews, which is a townhouse subdivision down in Alexandria. It's Fairfax County, though, that jurisdiction. Helped them get that through the entitlement process, and then help them develop it so they could build homes there.
And Greg, some of our folks don't live in the real estate development world, so you've used that phrase a couple of times, entitlement process. Could you please describe for our folks, what exactly that is?
Sure. Entitlement is just the description of the process whereby you take a raw piece of ground and go through the applicable jurisdiction, Fairfax County in this case, and submit plans, get them reviewed and approved by the county, all the way through to final approval, including, the platting, the actual subdivision of the property, so you can then build houses.
So that's sort of similar to a phrase that they've heard me use many times before, which is what I call permitting a project.
Yeah, basically the same thing.
Okay, great. And how about, I sent you over the Walsh-Colucci report and the plot plan and, the notes of meetings that have gone on. I've spent a little time with you on the phone describing in general terms what's going on. How about we start hearing some of your thoughts? What do you think of our situation? And as an owner's representative of ours, what do you think, and how do you think you go about helping us?
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Jason and Melanie echo. We talked a little bit about it. Obviously, we reviewed the Walsh-Colucci report, and we've talked to Parker. I think it's probably pretty clear that the association doesn't want to go through the full-blown, entitlement process with all the time and money expense that would be involved with that. So then the question is, if the association does want to go forward with possibly developing the parcel, how do you do that? Our thoughts are probably the smartest way to do it would be to understand a little bit better than I think right now maybe the association does what you have. In other words, for that piece of property, is it developable? What constraints does it have? Unless you guys have hired a civil engineer in the past, or there's some other study out there that we're not aware of besides, what Walsh-Colucci did. It's next to a body of water stream. I think there's a sanitary sewer line running through it. Are there any physical constraints or engineering type constraints? And then beyond that, obviously zoning and things. So what we think would be wise would be that the homeowner association, and I know probably don't want to spend money, but we think the smart thing to do would be to hire an engineer, and we could help facilitate that if you'd like, to just, without a lot of time and expense, to just look at the piece of property from an engineering, entitlement, zoning perspective, and give us their opinion, give you their opinion on what you actually have. Or is any of the development schemes that Walsh-Colucci laid out, are they doable, are they feasible? And then beyond that, there's obviously the political side of it, the reaching out to Kathy Hudgens or the county on a more political level. So we think it might be wise to again, research that, because the challenge is, as you guys may have already experienced, I think you maybe sent this out to Fraser Forbes, you can just, take the property to a broker and say, here you go, see what you can get for it. But you don't really know what you have. So that's why we think it'd be wise to know a little bit more what you had, what's possible for the property, so that you can then make an intelligent decision. And you could do that without spending a lot of money.
So let's just talk about that, tease that out a little bit. So anything that's going to happen in Fairfax County is going to happen because a developer is going to go to Fairfax County with a set of plans to put a project on our property. So one of the things that we've been talking about is, do we invite some developers in and have developers give us ideas about what they think is possible? Because clearly, if a developer isn't getting paid unless he gets a project permitted and done, he isn't going to try to propose something to Vantage Hill that is not going to get permitted, right? There's no incentive for him to move in that direction. So, one of the parameters that the board has established is that we really don't want to spend any of our own money. First of all, we don't have it. And the second is, and maybe you'll tell us something differently, but we think that a vacant piece of land on Wainwright with all the infrastructure basically there, you're not talking about clear cutting of, a completely, a forest that's set back 1,000 feet that you've got to put a road into, and some of the other challenges of what vacant land looks like around here. We're thinking that this is likely to be a pretty lucrative project for someone, for the law firms that are going to represent the developers and take it through the entitlement process, and for a developer who's going to end up with it. So, would you have some thoughts about, if you were our reps, do you have some thoughts about how we might get some very good information about what the developer community might think of this project without having to spend money to hire an engineer who can probably tell us a lot of what we already know? In zoning, as Walsh-Colucci has found out, we arithmetically could do 139 units. As a group, as a board, and as a community, we're pretty confident that the community will not vote for 139 units on that 1 acre site, or 1.5 acres, or whatever it turns out to be. So we're thinking that it's going to have to be a relatively manageable number. We don't know what that number is. Informally, we're talking about probably 40 to 80 in that range, who knows? But this is likely to be something that people would be interested in having conversations with us about without us having to go out and spend money with an engineer. What's an engineer going to say? He's going to say, well, how many units are you going to put up? And we're going to say, well, we don't know. That's what we're looking for. So we're trying to get, yes, we've heard this before. We heard it from Odin Pittleman. Dexter Odin said, go hire an engineer. We've heard it from one of the other law firms that we talked to. We could spend a lot of money and get ourselves into a place where I'm not sure that we know a lot more than we know right now. And so, do you have some other thoughts for us about what we might do about getting to having good information if you were representing us without us having to spend a lot of money? Or spend any money at all? How about we make that a parameter?
Okay, well, I don't think, going back to what I originally said, I don't think we're talking about a lot of money. I mean, if you did want to pursue that route, we might be talking between $5,000 and $10,000 or something like that, just so you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't want to spend any money, besides going the broker route, which maybe you don't want to do, where it's just blind, hey, tell me what I get for this property, because then the developer who might be buying the property through the broker is absorbing the risk because they don't know what they have, so you may not get as much money for the property as you would if they knew what they were getting. The other route that you mentioned, Parker, which is, I guess, interviewing developers, prospective developers, I mean, I guess you could do that. In my mind, they would have to study the property themselves, which they could do, and propose something. And I understand one of the big things is that the HOA wants to maintain certain things. They don't want to affect their parking. They don't want to clear a bunch of trees or too many trees. They don't want to go vertical, and it just destroys the character of the community. And those are the things that would have to be, enforced. In other words, as far as if a developer is going to give you a proposal, those are the parameters that you have to set forth. You want to add to it?
I mean, I think, as an owner's rep, if you didn't want to go that route, the first thing that we would need to do is sit down with the community and figure out what is the absolute max number of units. You take a look at the parcel right now, you've got a swimming pool that needs to be filled in. That's going to probably run you somewhere, $250,000. Right now we have not established a cost for the land. Any developer that comes in, any home builder is going to want to recoup all of that plus make a profit. They're not in the business for free. They're going to want to make something back. So we need to understand with the conservation areas, with the sewer line that runs through the property, the stream valley, some of the other infrastructure that's there right now that would have to be rerouted. We need to have a better understanding. So that's where Greg goes back. An engineer should sit down and just do a quick, study. If you don't want to do that, that's understood. We got to understand what your break-even point would be from a lot standpoint. A developer that comes in, a builder, is going to want to maximize the number of units. If the code says they can get 139, they're going to shoot for 139. And then if they have to start putting in structured parking, that's to accommodate the parking spots that you guys are looking for, or the open space that you guys are desiring, then it's going to cost that's added dollars to the bottom line. So they're going to again want to maximize those units. So what I would say, if you left the engineer out, if you left the attorneys out, as a group, and we were your owner's rep, the first thing that we'd recommend is sitting down, coming up with a development plan, the number of units, the style of unit. Is it a 2-story townhouse? Is it a 4-story podium-built, condominium type building? Those would be some of the things that we would recommend to you guys.
So one of the things that's a challenge for us is that you have, as you saw in the comments from the ownership in the town meetings that Walsh Colucci did, is you got a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. So one of the framing parameters for the board is having a fiduciary responsibility to the ownership, is we get one chance to get this right. So, our condominium association on almost 15 acres with 152 or 154 current units has the Aramath possibility of achieving 139 more units on our campus. Okay, that's the math. However, the ownership will not agree to 139 units on the pool site. So we need some creativity about maximizing units that isn't going to be just on the pool site, which is why the board offered up in its site development plan also the parking on the Vantage Hill Road side as long as the current ownership loses no parking. So there's more potential development site there in addition to the actual pool parcel itself, under the stipulation that you don't lose any parking at the end of the project. Everyone who's got a parking space now in the current units has to have a parking space at the end of the project.
Right.
So does that mean that you excavate it down and you do some kind of an elevated thing and the new townhouses have parking underneath and the current owners have parking above, and then you do some kind of development above that? And, we're going to need some creativity. So, I'm not trying to be disputatious, but I'm trying to tease out some ideas from you of, if you sat down with the community, I think we've already done that. You're going to hear things from turn it into a dog park to, well, I don't want anything on there because it'll impact the view. And, these are some of the challenges about trying to have the community design a project. Oh, and by the way, they're probably not going to have any understanding of valuation. They're not going to have any understanding of sort of where that sweet spot might be in terms of size versus proceeds. And the board, from a fiduciary perspective, can't agree to do 10, which we clearly could do there, without any impact whatsoever. When you're giving up the possibility of, somewhere between $50,000 and $150,000 a unit as proceeds to the board from the valuation that we've been hearing from various different people, you're leaving, if you do 10 and it could be 40, you're leaving 30 times, $100,000, you're leaving $3 million on the table. The board can't do that. So we actually need some expert help with this, because if we put it in the hands of the community, we're not likely to meet the board's fiduciary responsibility to maximize the proceeds within the confines of what the community will vote for. And that's the unknown. But what the board is preparing for is, if we have a sensible project, going to the community and saying, here's why this is the best thing we can do, particularly after some kind of an open, transparent, multiple bidder situation where we know that many people have looked at it and given highest and best for it, sort of an auction type thing. They can go to the community and say, here's the best thing for us, and here's what we're going to do with the money. Because one of the things our association needs is money to fix things that are going wrong in a 50-something-year-old building. So with that input, what do you think?
Well, I think, one option is to, again, if you wanted us to come up with parameters for, in other words, hey, we think the best use here that will preserve, based on what I've read and heard about input from those homeowners, a multifamily building with structured parking underneath that would have whatever the number is, 80 units, and that would limit it to a certain height and a certain footprint. And then possibly with that in mind, send out an RFP to certain developers and see what where it goes from there.
Yeah, because quite honestly, if you get into structured parking at all, you almost put the townhouse option off the table, because you can't make a townhouse work financially if you have structured parking. You really have to get the density of a multifamily building in order to be able to afford structured parking. So I've looked at that in the past in different places, and even quite honestly, multifamily. Now Reston's a good area for it, but even it's hard to make multifamily work with structured parking as well, unless you can get top dollar in the end. And so Reston is a great area to be able to get that. So, but that, I think where it's probably leaning, if you need to make up parking for residents and then you have to provide parking for whatever development goes on, you are leaning towards some sort of multifamily type of structure.
Yeah, well, one of the parameters is that, we'd like, one of the things that we're thinking about is, would these be condos that would become part of the become part of the Vantage Hill Condo Association? I mean, that's attractive from all kinds of perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would seem to make sense. Sure.
So I want to just, because we've heard this from someone else, tell us a little bit about why you sort of honed in on townhouses. What's the reason why townhouses were the sort of the thing that you were thinking, well, gee, what is that element?
I think what I was saying is that I don't necessarily think townhouses would work here. Townhouses, are typically fee simple. Now, you can build condo ownership townhouses. You don't, from a builder standpoint, you don't get as high of a return on a condo-style townhouse. But the problem is if you want to maximize your return, obviously townhouses, and I saw in the Walsh-Colucci report, they talked about the stacked townhouse. You still don't get, you get maybe, I think they're typically 24 by 40, 24 by 50 deep, as opposed to, depending on your townhouse, it's a 20 by 80. So you might get twice as many stacked towns, but it's still, in that small of an area, not going to maximize your value. So I truly, we can talk to townhouse builders as well and see what they think about it, but I don't think you're going to be able to make up parking in that area and then get the parking for the residents, the new development, and have the appropriate guest parking you need for Fairfax County. You're not going to be able to do that unless you do this structured parking. And again, structured parking and fee simple townhouses, I don't know if I can, off the top of my head, think of where that's been done anywhere, because it just financially doesn't work. So what you end up...
So why are you thinking fee simple townhouses are the thing that we're trying to, that we should be trying to meet?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that I think the opposite. I think
Okay.
that you probably, I think that's almost an option that's off the table.
Okay,
That you would end up with some sort of, whether it be condo or apartment ownership, some sort of multifamily in that area to maximize your return.
okay.
So, I mean, you know, if you, one of the reasons we wanted to go to the engineer, not to find out anything you already know today with the zoning. I mean, there's so much online. You can, I got the sewer maps online. So I went online and there's a sewer map right there. You can look and you can see where the sewer runs. So it's all.
Yeah, you got 18 of 394 pages because they sent us all that stuff as well as appendices.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
they have all the backup.
Yeah, we have all
So,
that, yeah.
okay, so that's, all that information's there. I think what Greg was suggesting is a lot of times an engineer or a land planner can do a quick layout study for you and pop a building, you know, a multifamily onto it and say, you know, if you were going to get 40 multifamily units on this site, what would that look like? And you could look at it and go, you know, is this going to be 6 stories tall? And I am just speaking out,
Yeah,
you know, I don't know what it is. Is it
Illustrative
going to be 6 stories tall? Well, you got a building right here that's 2 stories, and you've got a building right here that's 2-story. That's not going to work. And so I think that's why, you know, Greg was suggesting getting an engineer involved and just do kind of a back of the napkin quick study to kind of see what your yield might be able to be. Now, with that in mind, that gives you a little bit more to go out to the development community with. But if you really just don't want to spend the money, you can still solicit what they would do with the site. And they could do a back of the napkin and spend a minimal amount of money.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes they have that in-house, not a lot of times, and especially if they're smaller, they won't have that in-house, but they may be able to do it. And they would. If they were interested, they could do a quick back of the napkin study, come up with something and present what their idea would be. So that is definitely something that can be done.
I mean,
by them.
typically a developer would look at a raw piece of property and say, okay, what's the zoning, what are the constraints, blah, 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 and what can I do here? What can maximize my profit here? In this case, we're potentially, you know, telling the developer, well, this is what we want you to build here, or this is, you know, and that could work, but it kind of shoehorns them a little bit into something versus saying, tell us what you see here, but here are the constraints. We don't want you to do this, A, B, C, D, or E.
And they can work within that. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to have to because, you know,
Right.
as a community, we can't go, I'm sorry, as the board can't go to the community and ask for a vote on something that they know the community's not going to vote for. So,
Right.
you know, the developer is going to need some, I'll call them limiting parameters, so that their profit motive to maximize their, you know, to try to jam as many as 139 units as they can on the site,
They can't do
you know, that's never going to get voted on by the
Right.
community. The developer's going to be nowhere. So the developer is, I would think, realistically trying to figure out what can I do that I'm going to make money at, as well as get a vote for, because I'm not going to make a dime if I don't get the vote.
Right.
Just some other questions. So did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share along those lines?
No, I think
Not
we
really.
pretty much talked through that.
Okay. I've been asking this of everyone. We've gotten a range of opinions, but what do you think some numbers might look like, dollar-wise? I mean, do you think that we could put anything on the site? Do you think we could get, what's your sort of general sense of having been in this field? What might be possible and what might some economics look like for us?
Be honest with you, I don't know that we really looked at it from a market study kind of perspective. I saw the numbers that Walsh Colucci, we were just looking at it more from a engineering or what, feasibility. We typically don't, not that we can't, we can do it because we do occasionally deal with market studies and things like that. But that's where you engage a firm, and sometimes it doesn't cost anything to say, hey, what's a multifamily unit, an apartment or condo unit worth in this market, this square footage, and they could answer that question. I assume the numbers that Walsh Colucci put in there are probably in the right neighborhood, but, I think we need to do a market study to really validate that.
Okay, and do you have any working familiarity with, sort of cost of development?
I'm sorry.
With cost of development, so, if you
Yes.
put up a 40-unit condo if you put up a 40-unit condo development of roughly 1,000 square feet per unit, it's a 400,000 square foot unit, assume podium parking, what do you think a builder's cost would be to do that with engineering and all of the infrastructure and everything else, given that it's right on Wainwright? So you're not cutting a 1,000-foot road.
Well, it's hard to answer that question because obviously there might be, depends on what type of building you put there, if it's got parking or how you grade out the site. We don't typically price the building itself. We don't really look at that. We're land developers, so we look at the land. I hesitate to give you a number right off the top of my head as far as what the development costs. The entitlement. What do you think? Like probably the entitlement work to get a site like this done might be, might be as much as 150,000 or something. Because obviously there's not just simple engineering. There's going to be a legal component to it too, getting through the county process. It wouldn't be a huge development cost because it's a small site. The main cost is going to be obviously in the building.
Right.
Yeah, and again, the podium parking, I mean, I've looked at this pretty extensively in my past life about building in suburban areas with podium parking because it ends up being so expensive, and it really depends on what type of building you end up doing, but it very quickly becomes very costly to do podium parking.
So give us a sense, if you would, about what very costly is. So if you're talking about a 40-unit podium parking situation with us, what's costly? Is it 10,000 a unit per space? Is it 20,000? Is it 30,000?
Between 20 and 30, depending.
20 and 30 to do the parking itself, and then you're going to
Absolutely.
and that's going to be the foundation support for the unit above it.